Okay, quick book review on 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, and then in a short while I'm going to make a bit of a comparison to a book that I'm just reading at the minute, which is really, really good, a bit less well known, but I think it's worth giving a bit of a comparison there, so bear with me for a minute. So Peter Thiel's book 0 to 1 takes a bit of flack for being a bit elitist, and obviously he's a billionaire and very successful, and so people think that a lot of the stuff that he writes in this book is maybe not particularly relevant to entrepreneurs, but I'm not sure I agree with that. I think you can kind of take it on a bit of a sort of smaller scale. I think some of the stuff he says is quite valid, is very creative, quite ingenious in a way. I suppose you've got to be a bit of a genius, not to blow too much smoke up his arse, but to become as successful as he does. And he says that luck doesn't really come into it, which I think is maybe a little bit tongue-in-cheek possibly. I think you have to accept when you're really successful that things do have to fall into place at the right time to a certain extent, I think, but people make their own luck as well, and I think as an entrepreneur and business person myself, I do appreciate that the more work you put into something, the more driven you are, the more you want something, the more likely you are to achieve it. But I do think luck has to come into it somewhere as well. So, but that's something else to be debated another time. This book is really good. He talks about monopolies, and he talks about how monopolies are a good thing in that when they don't have to worry about competition, they can concentrate on other things. They can be more innovative and more creative, and they can give back more to society. So Google, for example, with sort of free internet and things like that. So that's a good thing. That's provided it's in a kind of dynamic world where that works. If it's in a static world, then they just become greedy and they just suck everything up, and like the Monopoly man in the Monopoly board game, they're just greedy, and that's not a good thing. But it can be a good thing. And he says that you should be aiming to become a monopoly. He says that you should be aiming to create something from nothing, so to go from 0 to 1. So you're not improving something that's already there, you're starting something completely from scratch. And he's arguing that in today's society we're less creative in a way, because we almost start off from a young age thinking, none of us would grow up wanting to be explorers anymore. The world feels as though it's been discovered already. People live on, in every corner of the globe. There's maybe certain parts of the deep ocean that we don't know about yet, but other than that, it's kind of been done. So we grow up feeling like things have been done already. He talks about our parents' generation sort of growing up in the 60s and how things were sort of really rapidly changing then, I suppose, with space travel and other things that he talks about. And they believe that things were going to continue at that rate. So actually he sort of argues that the world we live in today is very familiar, very similar to what it was back then, and in some ways it was expected to change a lot more than it has. So things like mobile phones that we're so obsessed with nowadays are kind of the big technology, but everything else has kind of stayed fairly similar really, which is quite an interesting point. He argues that people think that there aren't any more secrets left in the world, so there's nothing left kind of to be discovered in terms of new creative things, I suppose. When the telephone was invented, the car, and those huge things that went from 0 to 1. But he says that there do have to be still secrets left in nature that we're not yet aware of, secrets in people that we're not aware of, that people don't give away things necessarily until they're ready to give them away. So timing is obviously really key. He talks about something called the contrarian truth, which I find really interesting. So he kind of says, what truth do you have or do you believe that no one else kind of agrees with you on, and to kind of use that as something that you can kind of I don't know, leverage and springboard yourself into something creative. So contrarian truths being things like Netflix betting on people not wanting kind of the blockbuster style stuff anymore, and the way they've done that. Other companies he talks about, I won't go on and you read the reviews, read the book, but there are plenty of companies that betted on a contrarian truth happening, that people would have thought they were mad at a certain time before, but if you do it at the right time, when it's ready to come into fruition, then you can tap into that and you can make a lot of money, and you can do really well with that. So yeah, he mentions things like keeping the board of directors small as well, so making sure that they're your friends, they're people you get on with, because that can really sting you down the line. He talks about dominating a small market rather than trying to be a small part of a big market, and then kind of springboarding and kind of improving from there. So it's all about sort of big growth and domination, which is very interesting, and it depends what you want from your business. But the next book that I'm going to quickly compare it to is called A Company of One. by Paul Jarvis, and I'm reading that one at the minute, and I'm really enjoying it. I feel like it's a bit more relevant to me as an entrepreneur. Kind of, I'm not starting out. I've been in business for 6 years. I'm a social care consultant, and I'm kind of branching into personal development, which is why I'm doing these videos at the minute. My goal overall is to try and help young people with their mental health and anxiety through personal development, because I feel it's done so much for me that I think it can help young people as well. So I'm really keen on that. I'm into helping people with their career direction and entrepreneurship. But yeah, Company of One is really interesting. It almost says the opposite thing in a way. He talks about, let's get some light on the subject. He talks about, God, it's blowing outside, it's getting dark. Yeah, he talks about the not growing your company, not being obsessive growing your company, because people obsess about growth and getting as big as possible and taking staff on, and it's this big thing that society expects us to be as big as possible, but actually just having a business that works and makes a profit is actually something to be proud of. It's not setting your sights low, it's just accepting that maybe you're just as happy on £100,000-200,000 a year and living a decent life where you're not going to have a heart attack and get really stressed, as opposed to someone who's determined to make sort of billions, and maybe it isn't the best thing for you. So it's really interesting, and like I say, particularly the personal development stuff that I'm into. When you look at stoicism and you look at actually becoming a better person spiritually and stuff, you start to realise that huge amounts of money aren't necessarily the most important thing. Success isn't just about money anyway. Happiness certainly isn't about money. So it's a really interesting one to look at as well, Company of One. I won't talk too much more about it because I think that's long enough, and I don't want to spoil the book. But Company of One by Paul Jarvis, really recommended. 0 to 1, definitely recommended as well. Yeah, they're both very different books. Share similar things in some ways, I suppose, but both very different books, both worthwhile. Give them a read. Cheers.